former candidate for the U.S. Senate, longtime radio talk show host, author, and conservative policy advocate.
Justices to the Supreme Court, the left has been in open panic.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Oh, what a tangled web they weave, those Democrats, when they practice to deceive. Welcome back into Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. Are Democrats really going to pull the trigger on impeachment? And if so, when? That's the question that continues to linger over Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party leadership, which has spoken loudly and carried a small stick instead of the other way around. And we'll talk through the latest developments in the latest of the Democrats' never-ending claims that Donald Trump has committed impeachable acts and should be removed from office, as we're joined by the sharp-witted and sharp-edged political columnist for LibertyNation.com, Joe Schaeffer, and by Scott Cosenza for a double helping of Talkin' Liberty, including an in-depth discussion of California's decision to allow college athletes to get paid.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
We commence the proceedings with our signature segment, Say What, where we roll out some of the most wacky, astonishing, damnable, and ultimately revealing statements uttered by politicians and the chattering class. It's been 10 days or so since the Democrats made a show of declaring that President Trump should be impeached for violating the Constitution in his phone call with the Ukrainian president that included the subject of Joe Biden and corruption and self-dealing in Biden's crusade to fire the prosecutor who was investigating the Ukrainian energy firm which put Biden's son Hunter on their board and paid him over $3 million, despite a total complete absence of experience in the industry. They've certainly talked the talk of impeachment, but have yet to back up their bravado by walking the walk, likely because Pelosi knows it's a riverboat gamble that could wind up benefiting Trump. In fact, probably will benefit Trump, since impeachment has been the only item on the Democrats' agenda since the day after Trump was elected president. But listen to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi ooze insincerity in saying this week that she regrets having to pursue impeachment.
We take this to be a very sad time for the American people, for our country. Impeaching a president or having the investigation to impeach a president is not anything to be joyful about. I don't know that anybody's joyful, but it is a sad time.
Note the pregnant 5-second pause. She didn't know what to say because she's between a rock and a hard place, knowing impeachment is demanded by her radical Trump-deranged base, and yet politically fraught with peril. And her job became even more difficult when Trump this week employed his own daring, some have said reckless, strategy. Instead of running away from the Ukraine situation, the president doubled down, saying Ukraine is not the only country who should be investigating Joe Biden.
If they were honest about it, they'd start a major investigation into the Biden. They should investigate the Biden. Likewise, China should start an investigation into the Biden. Because what happened in China is just about as bad as what happened with Ukraine.
So what do the Democrats say to that? Well, they don't know what to say, because they never expected Trump to actually amplify his call for foreign countries to investigate Biden, just like they never expected him to release the transcript of the call or the complaint from the so-called whistleblower who's been outed as exactly what we knew he was, a deep state intelligence operative who never would have been able to file that complaint for lack of any firsthand knowledge of the call until the requirement of firsthand knowledge was suddenly eliminated right before the complaint was filed. Some coincidence, huh? And now we've also learned that Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff, he of the bug eyes and pencil neck, was contacted first by the whistleblower back in August and sat on the complaint. But he denied it until the New York Times came out with a story this week that saved Schiff the embarrassment of having it revealed by Trump or conservative media. But Schiff was hardly backing down. Instead, he actually threatened Trump, and just like after the Mueller report was released, in case the phone call itself doesn't move the impeachment ball down the field, he can always go after obstruction of justice.
And we want to make it abundantly clear that any effort by the Secretary, by the President, or anyone else to interfere with the Congress's ability to call before it relevant witnesses will be considered as evidence of obstruction of the lawful functions of Congress.
So Schiff, the man who claimed for months on end that he had proof that Trump colluded with Russia, but never produced the goods, is all in on this impeachment inquiry. But the story is starting to crumble as the so-called whistleblower takes a pounding, especially from the most articulate spokesman for Trump other than Trump himself, Stephen Miller.
It's unfortunate that the media continues to describe this individual as a whistleblower, an honorific that this individual most certainly does not deserve. A partisan hit job does not make you a whistleblower just because you go through the Whistleblower Protection Act. If you read the 7-page little Nancy Drew novel that the whistleblower put together, it drips with condescension, righteous indignation, and contempt for the president. It's also ludicrous on its face. It describes an elaborate cover-up that also, by the way, the president discussed on Sean Hannity, April 25th. What kind of secret cover-up are you also discussing on the airwaves of Fox News? Furthermore, the Inspector General found evidence of political bias in the individual, which is not disputed by anybody.
Of course, the one who likely stands the most to lose in this whole Ukraine thing is Joe Biden, especially now that he's had to start playing defense and explaining away the millions of dollars his son was paid in the immediate aftermath of his visits to Ukraine and China. Biden previously said he never talked to his son about those mega deals, but when asked this week, his story was different as he answered a question about the way Trump described him.
Biden and his son are stone cold crooked. Have you talked to your son about any of this?
I talked to my son. We've communicated. He lives out in California. We communicated a couple times. But look, there is zero evidence of any assertion being made. I'm not going to go into it now. Look, the issue is this president of the United States engaged in something apparent.
Note how quickly he changed the subject. Yeah, I talked to him a couple times. But the real thing is that Trump is committed. Blah, blah, blah. He never addressed the proven facts about Ukraine. And then Biden went on and gave a speech about it, playing exactly the kind of defense Trump tried to force him to play in the first place.
And note that even though every reputable publication has looked at the charge that has been made against me, they found them baseless and untrue and without merit.
Folks, Joe Biden is in deep trouble. He's getting laid bare on Ukraine. His lead in the Democratic presidential race is rapidly collapsing, and the face of the Democratic presidential race has changed perhaps dramatically. We'll explain how and why when we return.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
While impeachment fever grips the swamp, there have been some very significant developments in the race for the Democratic presidential nomination, some of them driven by impeachment, others by health issues. Well, what we've got now is a race that's very different than it was a couple of weeks ago. And joining us to discuss this potential seat change that's largely flown under the radar because of the impeachment obsession of Democrats in Congress and the elite media is the man who unmasks and takes a shredder to the political and media establishment as well as anyone in the nation, LibertyNation.com political columnist Joe Schaeffer. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Tim. Good morning to you.
Okay, you got your shredder out. Get it ready. The heat is turning up on Joe Biden on Ukraine. His lead is evaporating down from double digits to a skinny couple of points in the latest Real Clear Politics average. The oldest candidate in the field, 78-year-old Bernie Sanders, had a frightening medical episode this week. And Elizabeth Warren's steady rise towards the top has picked up steam as she benefits from the political problems of Biden and the health problems of Bernie. So, Joe, is Biden finished? Is Bernie finished? Is he toast? Is the nomination now Elizabeth Warren's to lose?
I think the Bernie thing is big. It's very huge. Yes. Biden is going on a trajectory that we all expected. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. I never thought he was a real front runner. It's mostly name recognition. But Bernie, I thought, was positioned well to have a real run to get the nomination. And now that is very much up in the air. This health thing is really going to shake things up. And Elizabeth Warren is the immediate beneficiary, but I thought it was very hilarious. Roseanne DeMoro is one of Bernie's top supporters. She's a big former union exec, very, very strong Democratic activist, and she's very popular on Twitter. And she sent out a tweet after Bernie's health scare, and she basically said, "That's why we have vice presidents." Now imagine that as a catchy campaign slogan. Bernie may die in office, but that's why we have vice presidents.
Yeah.
So, the optics on this, even if, we all hope he makes a recovery, of course, 100%, but this is going to look bad. It brings up his age. And it also brings up the fact that this campaign has not gone well for him. It doesn't have the dynamic of 2016. He seemed tired and angry even before this. So this is just the worst timing for him. If he doesn't make the debate, it's going to be a real problem. And if he's there and he looks tired and haggard, that may be even worse.
Yeah.
So I think this is a major shakeup for the Democratic field.
Well, what a couple of weeks it's been for Elizabeth Warren. She's been, without having to do a thing, she's benefited both from Bernie's health issues and Biden's growing problems with Ukraine. But can she shake the socialist label and be competitive outside of the two coasts and the big cities?
Yeah, I started thinking about that, what Elizabeth Warren in a general election will be like. She'd obviously try to go more towards the mainstream, but is she capable of that? Will Democrats even let her do that in a general election? I don't believe in this Elizabeth Warren major surge. It just sounds kind of silly to me, the idea of a surging Elizabeth Warren. She's not that great a candidate. She's not that... she doesn't have this charisma. She comes across as a school librarian, as so many people say. So this thing is far from settled. She's having a moment now. She's having a very good moment. She's always been top tier. But the flaws in her campaign are well known. And Trump is just, waiting to eviscerate her on so many issues, the Pocahontas thing and so many other things.
I mean, cultural appropriation is not something that's appreciated in the Democratic Party. But, of course, they've overlooked that in the case of this Native American thing. But let me ask you, if not Elizabeth Warren, not Bernie Sanders, not Joe Biden, then who? Who's gonna overtake Senator Elizabeth Warren? Who?
Well, there's somebody waiting in the wings, and I know she'd love to run again. There's been some rumors she's out there.
Oh, boy. Hillary watch is on. She sort of snuck her way back into the conversation with another, fingernails on the chalkboard kind of denunciation of Trump for impeachable offenses and all the same talking points as the rest of the Democrats. I mean, do you think that could really happen? Honestly?
No, it's funny, though. I'm enjoying the schadenfreude of it because you and I both know she's dying to get back in. She wants it so badly there's just no way in with it. I mean, every Democrat is blocking that door saying, no, Hillary, no.
Please just, I mean, all they've really seemed to be saying since the 2016 election is please just go away and stay away. But she can't. She can't do it, Joe. Now, listen, watching this whole impeachment fiasco, it strikes me as the first time we've ever seen the agenda for a presidential primary actually decided by people who are not running for president. I mean, it's Pelosi, Schiff, and AOC and the squad that seem to be determining what the candidate's going to run on. Impeachment, more than the candidates themselves are deciding. Am I right about that?
I think you are. I would agree on that. I also think that that's part of the Hillary dynamic, the impeachment, the Hillary. It's about other people, not the candidates running, because the candidates who are running are so weak. They don't bring a lot to the table. And I think this hurts them. Every time another issue, like the impeachment thing is dwarfing them right now, and they're dwarfs to begin with. So again, it's showing they're not driving the bus. They're not bringing anything that the American people are going to embrace on their own. And you can only run so far running against the other candidate.
Okay, Joe, well, this conversation is not over. We'll simply put it on pause and then resume it over the next, 13 months in the run-up to the election. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Joe Schaeffer, political columnist for LibertyNation.com. We're going to get off the impeachment train and come back with an extended edition of Talkin' Liberty in just a moment.
Where can you find honest political commentary? With sobering analysis.
Even the most trusting among us may find a company's latest plan deeply intrusive.
Accountability.
Perhaps it's time to start asking the right questions.
Deconstructing threats to our liberty.
Unparalleled insight into important stuff.
And boldly reporting the truth.
Truth is making a comeback.
Well, hello again, and welcome to Election 2020 Roundtable.
Uprising podcast of LibertyNation.com.
Abortion is functionally sexist.
From my cold, dead hand.
Subscribe to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel, where facts matter.
Click on youtube.com/LibertyNation.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And now, what you've been waiting for all show, our fourth and final, and some would say best segment called Talkin' Liberty, as we welcome back our regular contributor, constitutional lawyer, and LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor and podcast director. Did I miss anything, Scott Cosenza?
You hit the high marks in any case.
Hit the high.
Yeah.
That's good. On the CV.
That's right.
Curriculum vitae. I used it last week. I thought I'd do it again. A little insecure about whether people take me seriously, so I drop in words
ex
like
post
that.
facto earlier this week.
Excellent.
Indeed.
Excellent, counselor.
And it was appropriate in that instance as well.
Never more appropriate than now. Well, this first story is fascinating because it's got so many elements to it, and it is in California, where the governor has signed a law to allow NCAA, that means college athletes, to get paid. This was coming down the road for some time. We've been hearing about the possibility for years. Now the nation's biggest state has adopted it.
That's right. It's called the Fair Pay to Play Act. It won't go into effect, Tim, until 2023. But when it does go into effect, what it will do is provide a kind of host of measures that allow an athlete in California to capitalize on their likeness, their identity. So, for instance, LeBron James was quoted in reaction to this piece. He's made some news in discussing his support for the legislation, and he said he's famously, of course, a basketball player who went directly from high school to the pros and did not go into college. And he said, if he had gone to college, for instance, he would have been filling the center, the athletic center, every night to capacity in terms of the crowds that would have gone to pay to see him.
Yeah.
And everybody would have been able to get paid from that, especially including the university. But yet he and his mother, who were basically at the poverty line, where's their benefit from doing so? And so this will allow those people to actually sell their likeness and jerseys. And what it does, Tim, is it says that the mechanism for how it accomplishes this, it tells California universities that they are not permitted to declare ineligible athletes who do this. So typically what would happen is if an athlete was suspected of doing this, the NCAA might suspend them or direct their university to suspend them. And because the university is a signatory to the NCAA agreement, they're required to do so. So this is the legal mechanism that directs those university administrators. You will not touch an athlete who has done this, that they're acting legally now under California law.
I think it seems to me to be a just solution to the problem. They're not allowed to make money directly from the university for participating in athletic competition that draws thousands of fans and brings in millions of dollars, but to deny them the ability to then make money on the side means we're just advancing an outdated creed about college sports. Look, we all love it. We love the bands. We love the enthusiasm. Hell, I mean, I used to be a play-by-play announcer for college football and basketball. I loved it. I loved the Saturdays. I loved the spectacle, the bands, the whole thing. But let's be honest, these guys are essentially employees.
They are every bit of a pro athlete with the exception, Tim, of the compensation.
Exactly.
They have every obligation that a pro athlete does with respect to media and team obligations. And to expect that a person at the elite level, we're not talking, Tim, in terms of this payday stuff about a D3,
Division III
athlete who is not going to advance. We're talking about in terms of the elite who can really sell their image and likeness. And for those people.
But what about the hometown quarterback on a smaller program? Let's just say, let me pull one out of the air.
Sure.
Like Marshall University in West Virginia. It's kind of small, but it's significant.
You could do a local furniture store commercial. Absolutely. I'm thinking of that for real.
And why
do you know
shouldn't he be able to? Because the university is benefiting from the labor of these athletes. They're cashing in on them, and all they get with this lousy college education, which...
Well, they can't actually attend. Excuse me, Tim. They cannot attend to their college education because everybody knows, and that's why I mentioned in terms of the elite, and it is true even for the local elite, that the reason why they're there is not to focus on Sociology 101. It's not to learn the difference between the Tigris and the Euphrates. It's to play ball. It's to gain strength and speed, and that's why they. I salute the notion that they. I actually think that it doesn't go nearly as far enough to break the back of the NCAA stranglehold that governments have allowed. To be clear, if a private school wants to join this association and people want to go ahead and go to school there, I think that's appropriate. These are government schools, and it's supposed to actually encourage amateurism, which is the exact opposite of what we have here at those elite levels. There's no amateurism whatsoever.
The veil of amateurism was shattered so long ago that there's no point in even having to argue it out. Nobody would even argue that. So, look, I was involved in college sports for a long time. I saw what went on. I knew about the bags of cash that got carried around by coaches offering it to players who would never set foot on that university campus were it not for their God-given athletic ability. So, I mean, this sort of cuts through the hypocrisy of college sports. And you know what it does, Scott? It reignites the conversation that we've had for a long time, which is, what are the bounds of what college athletes should be allowed to do? Should they be allowed to be paid to play?
In most states, the highest paid government employee is the football coach at the big university
Absolutely.
in that state.
Yes.
It's all about money. It has nothing to do with anything other than that. And it's just gross and disgusting that often it's poor black kids, by the way, who are having to bear the brunt of this. They're the ones who are having a crust of bread and told, just keep working hard, kid, and enjoy your education, while I don't know, is it in the trillions? I don't know how many billions of dollars is spent on these enterprises, but it's a fantastic amount of money, and surely for the ones who actually are doing the work, the blood, the sweat, and the tears, they can see some green coming in as well.
All right, let's take this from a legal standpoint. How threatening is this decision in California to other state governments and ultimately to the NCAA? They're going to have a response to this. There's going to be legal challenges, all kinds of things. So where does it all stand?
We are at the dawn of all these challenges, Tim.
Right.
The NCAA has said they will challenge. Certainly they must, because this is an existential threat to their cartel, which is what they have. They have an iron fist like grip on athletic regulation, and they profit mightily from it. They are one of the major recipients of all this money. So this is a story we're going to revisit again and again as it works its way through back and forth through the courts.
Just one more note. Someone I know well who became a lawyer, did very well in college, went to a prominent university, or shall we say, it's a prominent university with an even more prominent basketball team.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me very matter-of-factly, oh, yeah, I used to take tests for name the star player. Used to take them for him. Used to take him for this guy, that guy. Everybody knew that was going on.
Right.
So, I mean, this is sort of unmasking it's starting to pull the veil off. They're not unmasked, but they're starting to pull the veil off, and it's gonna result, it seems to me, in a greatly changed equation in college athletics.
Hopefully, to the benefit of the people who are destroying their bodies in the name of same.
All right, a whole lot more to talk about with Liberty, and we'll do that when we return in just a moment.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And we are back with a second helping of Liberty here with constitutional lawyer Scott Cosenza. I'm not going to give you all the titles a second time, but let's jump right into your favorite place in the entire world, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where a judge has okayed a planned safe drug injection site. There's strong arguments to be made on both sides of the government-sanctioned drug injection site issue. Which side do you come down on?
Oh, I come down on the side that U.S. District Judge Gerald McHugh of the Third Circuit did this week, Tim, when he said that Philadelphia has to allow this thing to operate. This safe drug injection site. There is one, I think only one in North America currently operating, and it's in Vancouver, Canada. And what this does is it provides a physically safe place for heroin addicts to basically use heroin, and it prevents them. It addresses their kind of health needs by accessing them, by providing this place, and then helping to prevent overdose. They have Narcan and other resources there without the presence, Tim, of law enforcement to arrest these people for illegally possessing heroin, which, of course, they are. The Trump administration sued William McSwain as the U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. A Trump official sued Safe House in February after they basically announced that they would open this type of site, and challenged it that they were somehow aiding and abetting drug use impermissibly. The judge said, Tim, that facilitating safe drug use as opposed to unsafe drug use was not the same as encouraging drug use, and that the federal government's attempts to shut them down were unconstitutional. They're allowed to open.
It's like a greatly exaggerated example of when I did this too. My parents did it. I think a lot of them did. They said, we don't really want you to drink, but if you're going to drink, I want you to do it here.
Sure, do it at
with
home.
us. Do it at home. I'll pour you a drink if it means you don't go out and drink.
Right.
It's that same philosophy. How far if at all, do you think society, Scott, has moved down the road from heroin and opioid as a crime as opposed to an illness in the form of an addiction?
I think that it's moved massively. We've seen they're not the same drug, but obviously we've had a war on marijuana in this country that is, I think it's all over but the crying for the people who still want to have it be under prohibition. Now, I don't know that we're going to move to a situation where heroin is no longer prohibited, but I think we are going to move to a situation where instead of treating people who buy heroin like they're a criminal justice problem into a health problem, that's underway massively, as we see with Safe House. Now, nobody wants to live next door to or work next door to a heroin injection facilitation site, and I don't think that people are nuts for that. But at the same time, Philadelphia it's interesting that it's Philadelphia and Vancouver, because those are two cities in North America with perhaps some of the most pronounced heroin problems. Philadelphia is known as a city with a massive heroin problem, and there's an entire neighborhood of Philadelphia that's kind of been overtaken by the heroin epidemic called Kensington. And it's places like this, I think, that can help alleviate that problem, because those people are out there, whether a safe place exists for those people to inject heroin or not. I don't think that's going to increase by even one person the number of heroin addicts in Philadelphia, but it will certainly, Tim, decrease the number that are dead because of overdoses or don't get other health care that they may need. There are massive problems in that community that they can help, whether it's hepatitis outbreaks or other public health issues. Tim, it was the independently wealthy William F. Buckley Jr., I think, who might have been the 1960s, I don't even recall, he penned a great essay where he talked about the need for the decriminalization of all drugs. And he talked, for instance, about a heroin user who I think he speculated at the time could buy the amount of heroin that they wanted produced legally on the in a medicinal market at like $10 a week. But in order to steal enough to buy that drug at black market prices, they needed to get like $1,000 a week. But because of the way a fence pays a thief for stolen property, they had to steal like $20,000 worth of stuff a week in order to get the $1,000 to buy the inflated heroin prices, as it were. So the prohibition premium presents its own.
Well, it also means that people who are addicted to opioids, the singular pursuit of their life is getting the next dose.
Well, they say that heroin doesn't fix any of your problems. No. What it does is it reduces your whole life to one problem: getting more heroin. So it's a horrible addiction, and hopefully this will aid some people in seeing their way out of it.
Now, Scott, among the what seems like dozens of impeachable offenses or statements or actions of President Trump are his tax returns, his refusal to release the tax returns. We don't even have to go into, but I will mention in passing, how many times we, and you specifically, have pointed out that there's a whole lot more information on the financial statement that he was forced to release when he was running for president. But be that as it may.
Thank you for saving me the trouble.
You're welcome of having to do it again. Yeah. I mean, I'd have to pay you overtime this time. Now, but a federal judge has halted California's law targeting the Trump tax returns.
Yes, this is U.S. District Judge Morrison England Jr., who's a Bush appointee. And he had issued a preliminary injunction, Tim, against this law taking effect, but now he's issued his more formal order in the ruling. And the state of California is going to have to appeal, of course, to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is where it'll go, if they want to go ahead and enforce this law. I think that it's I don't know how to even say how much I think that this is a bad law. The Constitution of the United States of America sets the qualifications for office for President of the United States, and I don't think they made an exception for the California legislature to add their own qualifications, such as submission of one's tax returns. And then when you add the fact that there's really, I haven't heard a single person make a single argument that this is anything other than a partisan political attack. There's no...
I mean, how nakedly transparent can you be?
All the number gives you is the rate of tax that Donald Trump paid.
Right,
That's
so
it.
they can say he only paid 1%
Yes.
or 2% or something. And you know what? Do they really think after 2016 and the Access Hollywood tape and everything else that that's going to cause people to vote against him? But they really are just that desperate. We saw other states, particularly Colorado, where they said, well, we'll just award the electors to the winner of the national popular vote. And that was struck down by the courts as well.
It's disturbing to see state legislatures try to change rules for immediate political outcome in any case. It is distressing, and all people should look askance at such attempts, I think.
Perfectly stated. Okay, finally, let's go from, well, we've been all over the country. Let's stop finally in New York City, which has declared that using the term illegal alien can result in a fine of, wait for it, $250,000.
To Nuevo York. Yes.
I mean, I don't even know what to say.
This has to do with the New York City human rights law and the New York City the city's Commission on Human Rights. And a lot of people don't know this, that oftentimes states and big cities have these sorts of commissions, and they can levy pretty huge fines.
But this is in federal law. Illegal alien is actually the term that's used in law to refer to people who are, quote, undocumented. Am I right or am I right?
Tim, they're going to have to arrest some federal law enforcement agents if they use that term. That's no. You are right, but that doesn't mean that the commission can't do this anyway. I think that many of these sort of commissions acts are often violative of the law because they deal with feelings and they deal with attitudes, and surely they come from. Well, maybe they don't come from. I was going to say they come from a good place, but maybe they don't. Maybe they just come from the desire to control. I like to think that they come from a good place in terms of their motivation, but it seems like a stifling, blatantly unconstitutional, anti-First Amendment law.
What language will be next? Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Tim.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio and LibertyNation.com's own podcast, The Uprising, hosted by Scott and The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, where past is prologue, hosted by managing editor Mark Angelides, all available to you on demand at LibertyNation.com and, of course, from fine podcast providers everywhere, including the one that you use. So that is it for this week, but we'll be back at you next week, same time, same station. Till then, this is Tim Donner saying, stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.